In the heart of rural Bavaria, Germany, not far from the small town of Gruber, there stood a lonely farmstead known as Hinterkaifeck. It was March 1922. The land was cold. Thick snow blanketed the empty fields. Leafless trees stood like skeletons around the borders of the property, their limbs stretching toward the sky. There was no sound, no birds, no dogs barking, just the quiet hum of wind moving across the land. The farm looked abandoned, but it wasn't. Inside that wooden house, 6 people lived, or were supposed to. Hinterkaifeck was isolated. It sat at the end of a hidden path. No passing travelers, no curious visitors. The closest neighbors were far enough away that no one could hear a scream. The farmhouse had weathered walls, broken fences, and a barn with a wide, dark mouth that swallowed the light. Smoke sometimes rose from the chimney, but not always. On some days, the house looked completely still, like it was holding its breath. Locals whispered about the Gruber family who lived there. People said they kept to themselves, that strange things happened on that farm, that the family had secrets, but most people ignored it. It was just an old farm, just another quiet place far from town, until something happened. Something so brutal, so chilling, that even 100 years later, it remains one of Germany's darkest unsolved crimes. Inside that house lived 6 people. First was Andreas Gruber, 63 years old. He was not a kind man. People in the nearby village avoided him. Some feared him. He was known to be angry, controlling, and cold. Even his family seemed afraid of him. His wife, Kazilia, was 72. She had lived on the farm for decades, mostly in silence. She followed Andreas's rules and rarely smiled. Their daughter, Victoria Gabriel, was 35. She had been widowed during World War I. Her husband, Karl, had never returned from the front. She now lived back at the farm with her 2 children. Victoria's daughter, young Kazilia, was 7 years old. She was quiet, shy, and curious. She often played alone near the barn, collecting twigs and humming little songs to herself. Her younger brother, Joseph, was just 2 years old. No one knew who Joseph's real father was. Some said it might be a local man. Others whispered terrible things, rumors that even the police would later take seriously. The 6th person was a newcomer, Maria Baumgartner, a maid who had arrived at the farm only hours before everything ended. She had taken the job after the previous maid quit suddenly, saying the farm was cursed. She claimed she heard voices, that things moved by themselves. Maria didn't believe in curses. She needed work. She packed her bag, took the train, and arrived at Hinterkaifeck on March 31st. That would be her final day alive. A few days before Maria arrived, Andreas noticed something strange. Something that made him stop in the middle of his morning routine. As he stepped outside to gather firewood, he saw footprints in the snow. They came from the woods, from deep within the trees, and led directly to the house. But there were no footprints leading back. It had snowed the night before. These prints were fresh. Andreas followed the trail. The steps came straight to the back door and stopped. No one had knocked. No one had called. No visitor was expected. Inside, nothing was missing. Nothing was broken. But the thought of someone silently approaching the house, standing outside, and vanishing without a trace, it disturbed him deeply. That evening, he told his wife and daughter. They agreed it was strange. But life on the farm couldn't stop. There was always work to be done. The next morning, the footprints were still there, partly covered by new snow. But now Andreas noticed something else. A set of barn tools had been moved. He always kept them in the same place. Now they were leaning against the wrong wall. Again, no sign of entry. No broken locks. But someone had been there. Someone had come to Hinterkaifeck. And maybe never left. On the second night after Andreas found the footprints, new sounds began. It started softly, barely there. A creak, a thud, a sound like someone dragging something heavy across the wooden attic floor. Andreas sat up in bed, holding his breath. The house was silent, except for the occasional crackle of the fire in the main room. Then again thump, drag, thump. He got up, lit his oil lamp, and grabbed a rusty hatchet. Slowly, he walked through the hall and climbed the creaking stairs toward the attic. The door was shut. No sound now, just darkness. He opened the door and stepped in. Dust floated in the beam of his lamp. The air was thick. There were old boxes, a broken crib, tools, and sacks of grain stacked in corners. But no one was there. He checked the walls. The window. Nothing broken. Nothing moved. He came back down, still holding the axe, his lips tight. "I heard something," he whispered to Victoria. She looked up. "So did I," she said. That night, Little Kazilia wouldn't sleep. She cried and told her mother that someone was talking in the ceiling. Victoria didn't sleep either. She stared at the ceiling, her eyes wide open in the dark. The next day, Andreas searched the attic again. Still nothing. But that night, the sounds came back, and they were louder. The third sign came just days later, and it was more terrifying than footprints or sounds. A set of house keys disappeared. The Grubers had 3 sets, one for Andreas, one for Victoria, and one spare that hung near the front door. That spare set was gone. Everyone swore they hadn't touched it, but it had vanished. They searched the entire house, under cushions, inside drawers, near the well outside, but it was gone. Andreas became paranoid. He locked every door at night. He barred the windows. He slept with his axe next to the bed. Victoria wanted to leave the farm, even for a day, but Andreas refused. "This is our home," he said. "We don't run." But things kept happening. The barn door was found open, even though Andreas had locked it. A newspaper appeared on the porch, a paper no one in the family subscribed to. Footsteps were heard again, this time inside the walls. Then Victoria confessed something terrifying. Her daughter had said she saw someone in the yard, a man with a beard, just standing, watching the house from the edge of the woods. When Victoria ran outside, no one was there. Were they being stalked? Was someone already inside the house, hiding? March 31st, 1922. It was a cold, gray day when Maria Baumgartner arrived at Hinterkaifeck. She had been hired to replace the last maid, who had left 6 months earlier. That woman had fled the farm suddenly, saying it was haunted. She told people she heard whispers and footsteps when no one was there. She said the attic spoke to her. No one believed her. Now Maria was here. She was in her 40s. Strong, quiet, simple. She didn't scare easily. She arrived with her sister, who had come to help her settle in. The 2 women chatted outside the barn for a few minutes. Maria smiled and waved goodbye as her sister left down the long, empty path. That was the last time anyone saw anyone at Hinterkaifeck alive. Maria was shown to her room, a small space behind the kitchen. Victoria made her some tea. The children played quietly in the next room. Outside, the wind picked up. The sky darkened. No one knew it, but within hours, the entire house would fall into silence. The next day, the farm stood still. No smoke from the chimney. No footsteps in the snow. No sounds of animals being fed. The family had vanished. April 1st, 1922. The day after Maria's arrival, the farm became silent. Too silent. Neighbors noticed first. The chimney was cold. Smoke had always risen from it by sunrise, as the Grubers made breakfast and boiled water. But now, nothing. The mailman passed by on his usual route. He saw the house, but no one came to collect the newspaper. That was strange. Andreas was known for being early, sometimes waiting outside for his letters. But today, the paper sat untouched. That night, still no lights in the windows. No barking dogs. No activity. On Sunday morning, the family did not attend church. This was serious. Victoria sang in the church choir. She never missed a mass. The little girl was always there beside her in her small wool coat, holding her mother's hand. People started to whisper. Something was wrong. One neighbor, Lorenz Schlittenbauer, walked to the house and knocked. No answer. He walked around the side. The barn door was slightly open, but he didn't go inside. Something felt off. He left, but the feeling stayed with him. It wasn't until Monday that concern turned into panic. Young Kazilia hadn't shown up at school. And now, the animals were crying, pigs screaming from hunger, cows mooing wildly. No one had fed them. By Tuesday, the town knew something was terribly wrong. On April 4th, a small search party arrived at Hinterkaifeck. Among them was neighbor Lorenz Schlittenbauer, 2 local farmers, and a constable. They approached the barn first. The animals were screaming. Inside the barn, it was cold and dark. The hay was scattered. The floor creaked under their boots. One man stepped forward, poking at a pile of hay with a stick. Something was underneath. He pulled back the hay and screamed. There, half buried in straw, were the bodies of Andreas, Kazilia the elder, Victoria, and little Kazilia the child. They had been stacked on top of each other, covered in hay like discarded objects. Blood had soaked through the wooden planks beneath them. Their faces were crushed. Each of them had been killed with a pickaxe or mattock, a heavy farm tool. Victoria's face was frozen in horror, her eyes wide open. Young Kazilia's hair had been torn out, clumps of it were still in her hands, as if she had ripped it during her final moments. The men backed away in shock. Inside the house, it was no better. In the nursery, they found baby Joseph murdered in his cot. In the maid's room, Maria Baumgartner was lying dead on the floor, still in her coat, as if she had just been about to unpack. The killer had murdered everyone, even the children, and then stayed on the farm. The animals had been fed. The fireplace was warm. Beds had been slept in. Someone had lived in the house for days after the murders, calmly caring for the farm, pretending everything was normal. The police arrived later that day, and the scene they found was like something from a nightmare. 6 bodies, all brutally murdered with blows to the head. No signs of struggle from the adults. But young Kazilia had fought. Her hands were bruised, her face torn. She had likely lived for several hours after the attack, dying slowly. They inspected the barn. There was no sign of forced entry. No windows broken. No doors smashed. The killer had likely lured the family members one by one into the barn. First Andreas, then his wife, then Victoria, then the little girl. He killed them quietly, one at a time. Then, he calmly entered the house and killed Joseph in his cot. Finally, he murdered Maria, likely the last to die. There were other strange details. The family dog was found alive but injured, locked in the barn. The house was lived in for several days after the murders. Food had been eaten, beds slept in, milk used. The livestock had been cared for. Who could do this, and then calmly go about living among the corpses? Police searched the property from top to bottom. In the attic, they found a hidden spot, a place where someone had been sleeping. Blankets, crumbs, and even waste. It was likely the killer had been hiding in the house for days, even before the murders. He had watched them, listened, waited, then struck. As investigators moved deeper into the house, the atmosphere felt heavy, like the walls had absorbed the terror. The kitchen table was set, plates with leftover food, a spoon half dipped in cold soup, a teacup still warm, as if someone had just left the room moments ago. In the children's bedroom, they found Joseph. The toddler had been murdered in his crib, struck on the head, then covered with one of his mother's dresses. It was like the killer tried to hide the horror or couldn't face what he had done. In the maid's room, Maria's body lay twisted on the floor. She still had her coat on. Her suitcase sat beside her, unopened. She had arrived the day she was murdered. It meant the killer waited for her to arrive, then began. In the cellar, they found bloody footprints. Some led to the stairs, then stopped. No one knew if they belonged to the killer or one of the victims trying to escape. There were small things too, things that made the house feel haunted. The dog barked at the attic even after the police arrived. A photo of Victoria and her children was found face down on the floor, shattered. The family Bible had been ripped and thrown in the fireplace. Was this random violence? Or something deeply personal? Police searched for weapons. In the barn, they found the murder tool hidden in the hay, a heavy mattock, its blade still stained dark red. But the strangest discovery was this. Someone had fed the animals. Someone had cooked food. Someone had slept in the family's beds after the murders. For at least 3 nights, the killer had stayed, lived among the dead, without fear, without guilt. The investigation spread fast. The Hinterkaifeck murders made headlines across Germany. The police interviewed over 100 people, and multiple theories began to form. Theory 1, a robber or drifter. Some believed it was a random killing, a robbery gone wrong. But that didn't make sense. Nothing was stolen. All the money in the house was untouched. Expensive jewelry was still in Victoria's wardrobe. Even the farm tools and animals were left in perfect condition. Why kill 6 people and take nothing? Theory 2, someone close. Others believed it had to be someone who knew the family. Someone who understood their routines, who knew where the keys were kept, who waited for the maid to arrive, and then attacked. Suspicion quickly fell on Lorenz Schlittenbauer, the neighbor. He had helped search the house, but people noticed something odd. When Lorenz entered the barn, he walked straight to where the bodies were hidden, as if he already knew. He also opened doors without hesitation, as if he was familiar with the layout. And the most disturbing fact? Lorenz had once claimed to be Joseph's father. He had tried to take legal responsibility for the child, but later withdrew. Could this have been a crime of revenge? The police questioned him again and again, but found no proof. Theory 3, a soldier or war criminal. Some suggested that a deranged soldier from World War I, someone mentally broken, had returned and committed the crime. Germany was full of wounded souls after the war. But again, why this farm? Why stay afterward? None of the theories fully made sense. And so, the case grew colder and darker. As the investigation deepened, whispers turned to rumors, and then to dark truths. It came out that Andreas Gruber was not just feared, he was hated. He was known to be violent, abusive, and cruel, not only to outsiders, but to his own family. There were disturbing claims that he had an unnatural relationship with his daughter, Victoria. In fact, Andreas and Victoria had both once been arrested for incest, a crime in Germany at the time. Andreas had served a short prison sentence. People wondered, was Joseph not the child of a lover, but his grandfather's child? Was Victoria a victim, living in terror with no escape? If so, did someone kill the family to avenge her? Or was the killer trying to cover up something darker? Victoria had also been involved in a church choir and was said to be secretly seeing a local man. Perhaps the affair had gone bad. Maybe someone had learned the truth. Some even believed Victoria herself might have known the killer, that she may have invited them in. Maybe the killer hid in the attic days before, watching the family, waiting for the right moment to strike. Whoever it was, they didn't kill out of desperation. They killed with rage, and they killed with patience. As the years passed and no answers came, the line between fact and fear began to blur. People began to whisper, maybe this wasn't just a crime. Maybe it was something more. Locals said the farm had always felt cursed. Even animals refused to go near it after dark. Birds flew wide around its chimney. Horses pulling carts would stop and tremble near the path. Some said they saw shadows in the windows long after the murders. Others heard voices when the house stood empty. One neighbor swore she saw a woman in white standing in the field, staring at the forest. Stories grew darker. What if the killer wasn't a man at all? What if the noises in the attic weren't footsteps, but something else? Some believed the house had become possessed, that a spirit had taken over, driven by anger, hate, or unfinished pain, and that it had fed on the fear inside the walls. Even before the murders, things were strange. The former maid claimed to have seen faces in the attic. Victoria had told her pastor she was being haunted. The child, little Kazilia, had told her teacher she dreamed of blood. The signs were always there. No one listened. And when the evil finally arrived, it didn't leave. After the investigation failed, the farm was abandoned. No one wanted to live there. No one wanted to buy the land. Even the wood from the house was believed to carry a curse. Eventually, the entire building was torn down. The walls that had witnessed unspeakable horror were destroyed. Where the house once stood, a small shrine was placed, a white cross with the names of the 6 murdered souls. But time did not erase the memory. In the years that followed, journalists, writers, and ghost hunters visited the place where the farm once stood. But no answers ever came. The case file grew dusty in police archives. Some evidence went missing. Witnesses died. Still, the story lived on. Teachers told it in whispers to scare students. Parents warned children not to go into the forest near Kaifeck. And every few years, someone claimed to see something at the edge of the trees. Something watching. 100 years have passed. The snow still falls over the fields where Hinterkaifeck once stood. The trees still creak in the wind. But the house is gone. The people are gone. What remains is a silence that never feels peaceful. The killer was never found. No trial. No justice. No confession. Just 6 lives erased. A child clutching her hair in terror. A baby left alone in his crib. A maid who walked into a nightmare on her first day. No one will ever truly know what happened that night. But when the wind blows over that empty patch of land, and the forest whispers through the trees, some say you can still hear it. The footsteps, the attic creaks, and the sound of someone breathing softly behind the walls.